Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome all of you to Ohio Wesleyan and to the annual Heisler Business Ethics Lecture Series, which I believe is the final event this year for the Walter Center for Economics, Business, and Entrepreneurship, a program that supports our programs in economics and related fields, including business administration. The Heisler Lecture was endowed by the Heisler family with the intent that we would spend time each year reflecting upon the importance of moral judgments and ethical values in relation to leadership in business. And I would propose that perhaps never has that been more important than it is today. It seems that when we open the papers nearly every day or turn on the news in the evening, we find ourselves reading or hearing about the consequences of lapses of moral judgment, of lapses of concern for ethical values, whether in leadership in business or in other sectors of our society. And here at Ohio Wesleyan, where we seek to offer an education that prepares the next generation of moral leaders for a global society, I can think of nothing more important than reflecting upon the important role of ethics in business. And so that is what brings us together this evening. It's my pleasure to introduce now from the faculty in business administration, Dr. Glenn Bryan, who holds the title of Associate Professor of Business Administration. Glenn is a business professor here where he teaches corporate strategy and marketing to the next generation of business leaders. He also provides strategic leadership and management development to growing firms through his organizational development consulting practice, and occasionally that practice provides opportunities for our students to connect their classroom theoretical experiences with practical real-world experiences. Infused into his teaching is the theme of leadership with character and a desire to grow students into professional business leaders that are also productive citizens. His goal is to empower leaders to not only achieve high-performance metrics, but to do so while building socially responsible and sustainable organizations. Working with other faculty in his department, he guided the development of the Leadership Character Development Program used across the OWU Business Administration major. Dr. Bryan currently serves on the Board of Directors for Central Ohio Better Business Bureau and periodically serves as an advisor to the BBB National Center for Character Ethics, which seeks to help leaders put integrity into action through ethics education programs. Dr. Bryan has a doctorate in marketing from Cleveland State University, a Master of Business Administration from Boise State University, and a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics from Eastern Nazarene University. It's a pleasure to introduce Professor Glenn Bryan.
Well, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our speaker to you today, but real quick, every time I see ethics on paper, it always seems kind of boring and dry and dull for me, and so it's always good when we're able to take this very valuable concept of ethics and see it lived out, and I think we're going to be able to do that today. One more example of that. So our speaker today, Scott McComb, is Chairman, President, and CEO of Heartland Bank, which is located down in Gahanna, Ohio. It's a $683 million in assets operation, 12 branches in the Columbus metro market. I spent some time looking at Scott's work history, and it's very clear that this is an entrepreneur and a forward thinker. So while a student attending OSU, he started a security business, which he then sold to Vector Security and then became their vice president. And then as a forward thinker, what's interesting is he joined the Heartland Bank in 1999 as the director of internet banking. Now that might be lost on you, but you need to think about where the internet formation was at in 1999, and then to be able to take on to that type of position. He launched the first internet bank offering by a community bank in Columbus at that time, and then because of his successes was promoted to EVP, Chief Operating Officer, and then President ultimately in 2008. Last year, Kip Morris, the CEO of the Central Ohio BBB, presented at this Heisler Business Ethics Lecture with a panel dealing with building trust-principled businesses. And then interestingly, Scott has a long-standing relationship with Kip and the Central Ohio BBB. And as a result of his commitment to building trust-oriented organizations, specifically at Heartland Bank won the BBB Distinguished Torch Award for Ethics in 2012, which is quite an honor, by the way. And then Scott presented with Kip Morris to the Board of Directors of the Associated Military Bankers of America, linking trust development with self-regulatory standards. So this is a gentleman that lives out the element of ethics, character development in his businesses and organizations. So Heartland Bank, as led by Scott McComb, is committed to building trust-centric businesses or business that exemplifies the role of ethics and character in today's business environment. So please welcome Scott McComb to speak to us on the topic of morality in business. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Does that sound good? Welcome everyone, and thanks very much for coming on such a, I got the kind of the rough deal here, right? So I've got the nicest evening that we've had in Central Ohio in like 4 months to speak to you about a topic that's not too prevalent in today's world, but we're gonna shed the light on that. And we're gonna have a little fun along the way. Want to thank you all for being here. Just a little merciless plug for Heartland Bank. We're a community bank. We're one of the remaining 4,800 community banks in the United States. The reason that we have the world's largest economy is for two reasons. We have a dual banking system and we have freedom. It's that simple. So as we have continued regulatory environment, I know we have some Federal Reserve people in the room as well, some past Fed folks, and some and bankers as well. Banking is a highly regulated business, and it should be, right? Because we're dealing with other people's money. We rely on trust. Everything in banking revolves around trust. So when we talk about ethics in business, nowhere does it need to be more prevalent than in banking. Now, we're going to talk about some items in banking, though, that you're all familiar with, that showed that not everyone is ethical in banking. Not everyone is ethical in many different areas of business, but it's a choice. It's a life choice. It also has to do a lot with your natural environment. And with those opening comments, we're just going to roll right in and get started. Hopefully we can have some time at the end for some comments and questions, so we can talk about how this affects us each and every day, and how you're personally rooted in who you've become and what you're going to be, because it's not predetermined. So with that, business ethics, reality or myth. So it's kind of like, does it really exist anymore? Is ethics like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster or something like that? I mean, does it really happen? People say, well, geez, it doesn't really exist anymore. Well, we're going to challenge that theory today. So first, a little bit about me, because I think that everyone speaks from different platforms, right? And it has to do with a lot of things. It has to do with who you are as a person, where you grew up, what your values are, what experiences you've had, all the different things that make you you. And everyone's unique. So I'm sure when you first got here to this great college, they probably told you that, right? Hey, remember, you're here to figure out who you are and who you want to be from this point forward. You came in with certain skills, you're going to leave with other skills. It's up to you, right? That's the blessing that we have here in America. Well, here's just a little bit about myself. So I was born in Ironton, Ohio. That's the home of the NFL, by the way, if anybody didn't know that. That's where the NFL was founded, Ironton, Ohio. So I was there for about a year on the Pilgrim Trail from West Virginia. So my parents grew up in the deep, deep, deep mountains of West Virginia. So I still have relatives that live in the trailer behind the home house, and then their kids are down the street and such, and we have our own holler, and it's real. That happened. That's where my family came from. So both my mother and my father came from very, very modest means. I don't know if you know anybody from West Virginia, but they're the nicest people in the world because they grew up with nothing and they don't even know it. So next time you hear from somebody from West Virginia, just look at them character-wise. People that usually come from nothing are pretty humble folks and very giving and forthright. So just a little plug there for my heritage hometown. I was a Presbyterian. So my parents believed in faith. So I was at church, and they relied on, as when they came to Columbus, they relied on the church family to babysit, to watch the kids, to keep me from tearing things up, to help teach us. So that to this day, I still look at those folks that I went to church with as a child, and I say, these people helped raise me. Because really, that's the way it is, right? In our small towns and things of that nature. That's the experience that I had. I was a member of 4-H. So my father credits 4-H. His name was Tiny. That's his real name. He was not very tiny, though. He was about 6'2", 6'3", weighed about 250. He grew up on a cattle farm in West Virginia, and he accredits 4-H with really opening his eyes to the big world. So he got to go as a high school senior to Chicago on a livestock judging trip. Okay, and that's how he got his college. He got a college education grant to attend the first couple of semesters at Marshall University. So he attributes 4-H. He really thought it was really good for me to be in 4-H, and so I was a 4-H'er, and to this day I'm still supporting 4-H because it's a great organization, youth leadership on not only agriculture but all different spectrums for inner city kids and that kind of thing as well. I was in the Boy Scouts. So I was, doing the oath and the whole deal, and I had every merit badge that you could get, but I was not involved or interested at all in moving up in the ranks. They're like, Scott, you've got all the merit badges. You need to go on to the next rank. And I'm like, why? I'm having so much fun. We're canoeing, we're camping. I can tie knots. I can do all this stuff. This is awesome. They're like, no, but it's about advancement. And advancement just was not in my repertoire at that time in my life. And then I also was turned on to masonry. My father was a mason, and he encouraged me as immediately I turned 21 to get a petition and join the Blue Lodge, which is the Master Mason Lodge, first 3 degrees in masonry. I then went on later in life to be a 32nd degree Mason, which is part of the Scottish Rite. I became a Shriner, the guy that wears the fez, and we help burn children, Shriners hospitals. And then a few years ago, about 5 years ago, I was lucky enough to be bestowed the 33rd degree. So I'm a 33rd degree Mason, and that's the highest honorary degree that you can get in Masonry. I didn't get it by working my way up through the lodge. I was nominated because of my benevolent works in the community. So I've never been a past master of the lodge or anything else, but that's how I was able to get that designation. I'm very honored to be part of that brotherhood. So that's just a little bit about me. That's the moral part, though. Okay, so I talked about the roots, talked about the experiences that I was, that I was exposed to. I talked about, the time that was spent with me by various elders, various, mentors. So let's talk a little bit about the professional side. So I went to the Ohio State University twice. The first time I majored in High Street. So I was really good at High Street. I was good. You learn to budget, you learn to love, you learn to fight, all those good things. And so finally, President Jennings sent me a letter. I was becoming a senior, and he's like, Scott, you have to declare a major. You're a senior. I'm like, oh, this is just so much fun, though, Anyway, I dropped out of school because I started a business. So it was called PFM Alert Systems, Police, Fire, and Medical Alert Systems. So I started that when I was 20 years old. And I took the proverbial quarter off of school, and I didn't get my degree at that time. The business took off, and I started to have employees and all that kind of thing. I ended up growing a cleaning business, a locksmith business, and then we did construction inspections kind of on the side as well. The cleaning business happened to be with Heartland Bank, so my first job really at Heartland, I was the janitor. That's a true story. They turned into a cleaning business, though, with like 25 locations. It was great. Paid the mortgage for sure. Then I sold my company to a company called Vector Security. Vector Security is a big provider here in Central Ohio now. That was my company previously. They're a very large company based out of Philadelphia. And so after I sold my company to them, though, I could not earn any stock in their company because they're owned by the Philadelphia Contribution Ship, which is the original insurance company in America founded by Benjamin Franklin in 1752. So you can't own any of that company. That kind of disenfranchised me. They paid me well. I got to go on cruises and sales contests and all this stuff. It was great. But I couldn't own any of the company. So the sweat equity part of me working 80 hours a week kind of evaporated. And that was a kind of a turnoff for me. I was an entrepreneur. I wanted to grow equity. I also paid more tax than I'd ever made in a wage at that point. And I thought about defecting just so I wouldn't have to pay the tax. But that would be unethical. So I didn't do that. So then I joined Heartland Bank back in 1999. My father, my father started Heartland Bank, okay? So he was a career community banker. He had the opportunity to start Heartland, and just real quick, that story. The way Heartland started, it started off in 1911 as the Croton Bank. A gentleman by the name of Mr. Kenny wanted to sell the bank, and so my father was running Key Bank at the time, actually Society. So you know Key, right? Key Bank. Well, it was Society back in the day. And so he was running all the Central Ohio operations because his little community bank he ran got molded up into Society Bank. And so he knew that the next big expansion area was going to be northeastern Central Ohio because there was nothing there. This was 1984, 85. Easton wasn't there. I mean, the Outer Belt was only like 6 years old. All these things were happening in that area, or going to happen in that area. And so he went to Cleveland and said, hey, we need to buy this little bank in western Licking County. There's all the growth area is going to be that way. And of course, he's up in Cleveland telling that. And they're like, at that time, Cleveland was like the boss of Ohio, right? Everything was run out of Cleveland. So they said, oh, Tiny, going back to Columbus, we're running things out of Cleveland. We don't want to be in northwestern, or northeastern Central Ohio. And he's like, no, really, there's this guy. He's going to buy a town. His name's Les Wexner, and he's going to have a campus here, and they're going to build a freeway, and they're going to do all this stuff. Like, we're not interested in that. So he goes back to Mr. Kenny, and he says, Mr. Kenny, I'm very sorry, but the gentlemen in Cleveland don't want to buy your bank. I'm really sorry. And Mr. Kenny says to my father, he says, well, Mr. McComb, I will not sell my bank to those gentlemen, but I'll sell my bank to you. And my dad, thought for a moment, and he didn't know what to say. And he said, well, can I get back to you on that? He said, sure, you just come back and see me next week. Okay, so he left and went and started calling some of his best customers. People like Jack Eggspuler, who used to run Don Scott Field and Aerosafe in Central Ohio. Bob Amorine, who runs a company called ISCO. All these people are just multimillionaires, but they're good customers of my father. And he says, hey, this guy's willing to sell his bank to me, but I got to raise capital, and we can do this and that, and I think I got a way to figure it out. Would you support me? Every one of them was like, let's do it. This would be a great thing to do. So they raised $6 million back in 1986 and 87, which was a lot of money back then. $6 million is a lot of money, period. But that's what they needed to buy the bank. And they raised $6 million, created Heartland Bank Corp., bought the Croton Bank, changed the name to Heartland Bank, and that's how Heartland Bank started. So pretty good entrepreneurial story right there. I didn't know till just a few years ago, after I was going through some old boxes, that my dad bet everything he owned to do that. His net worth was $96,000 when he started Heartland Bank. He believed in it so much, he believed in his customers, and he knew he had their trust. He had a commodity that no one else did. It's really not a commodity. He had a skill and a treasure that a lot of folks in that industry didn't have. And I wouldn't be standing here today talking to you if he hadn't leveraged it. So that's how Heartland started. So it's a pretty neat success story all along. I was not allowed to join the bank, by the way, at that time because I was high risk still. Yeah, I was at troubled youth, a youth at trouble. So, but I grew up pretty quick being an entrepreneur because you don't really have time to get in trouble. A few other things that I've done. I'm a very big supporter for the USO. I've served as their board chairman 2 times, so I've been involved with them for 12 years now, and that's very, very rewarding. I never served, and this is the kind of the way that I could give back to the country by supporting the men and women that protect our freedom. So that's one of the things that I hold dear as well. And now I'm a leadership banker with the Independent Community Bankers of America. So I run 2 or 3 of their companies. One of the companies I'm the chairman of the board of, we're the 7th largest credit card processor in the country. And we own another little bank that's about a $350 million bank called TCM Bank. They do nothing but credit card processing for community banks. I have several other positions there as well as serve on their board of directors. So with that, this is my professional acumen. So you take the other acumen, right, the personal acumen, and you lay this over top of it, and that's where my professional comments and personal comments are coming at you from today. Okay? So why does all of this matter? Why does it matter? You ask yourself, people try to, it's a choice, right? It's a choice every day whether you want to be a victim of your circumstances, whether you want to take advantage of your circumstances, leverage your circumstances and your ability and what you've been taught and what you believe. It's really your choice. It's your choice. No one else's choice. And so what you do with that is very, very important, okay? And what you have to work with and what resources you decide to tap make you who you are and make you what you're going to become. So several different things that happen here. One, it makes you who you are. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. Color is how you see the world. So I see the world very differently than a lot of other folks. Everybody sees the world differently, right? And it's all about this upbringing. It's all about these experiences, all the collective things that you see. That's where your colors come from. It formulates your initial opinions and judgment. Notice the initials all in caps, because you can change. Everybody can change, right? Just a matter of how much effort you're willing to give it, where you want to go, who you're hanging out with, who are your role models. Do you seek role models? All those things matter. It becomes your life's clay, ready to be molded. And it happens all the time. So just because if you're 65 or 70 years old doesn't mean you can't start. You might have a longer road because you've written most of your song already. But the fact of the matter is, you can change. Everybody can change who they are. You just have to put your mind to it. So who is Heartland Bank? Again, we'll just talk real quick. My bio was a little outdated. I apologize. We're approaching $1 billion. We have 15 branch offices. We've been ranked in the top 100 community banks in the nation for the last 7 years running based on return on equity. I have 192 families that I'm responsible for. That's kind of the way I think about it. So we have 192 families depending on us and our ethics and what we do and our return. So it's real important. 200-member team, and we just moved our office to Whitehall, Ohio, which is kind of a rough area, but it's coming back. They needed a community bank. We needed a new corporate headquarters. It worked. So we're helping that community because they could use us. We can make a difference there. Dublin didn't want us. We're small potatoes for Westerville, for all these other bigger towns. Whitehall was at our doorstep asking us to be part of their community, and that mattered. And so we decided we'd do the right thing and go there where they needed a community bank. So what's the biggest risk in banking? Anybody want to shout it out from the rooftops? Take a guess. There's no wrong answer. This is the audience participation part. What's that? Defaulting on loans. Okay, that could be a big risk. Credit could be a big risk. Thank you. What else? Remember, the biggest risk for the bank. How about reputation risk? That's the biggest thing. So let's say that you guys heard your bank, okay, with the bank will remain nameless, Bank ABC. We'll just use Heartland. Let's just say that you heard that Heartland was going to fail. What are you going to do? You're going to run down there and get your money out of the bank, right? Everything over $250, right? So that becomes a run on the bank. Well, guess what? Is all the money at the bank? No. All the money is not at the bank because banks use leverage. We create money through capital. That's what banking does. And that's why reputation risk is the biggest thing that we have. The biggest thing. So, it's a function of leverage. I can take $1 and I can make $10 out of $1. That's the function of banking. Okay? So I take an investor, usually an upstanding person in the community that wants to invest in their community. They will buy $1 worth of my stock. I promise to give them a fair return and not lose their dollar at the same time. And then I get to leverage that dollar up to 10 times. You can go higher than that, but we'll just use it for simple math. It'd be between 9 and 14 times. Okay? So that's what banking's all about. And if there's ever a run on the bank, you guys have seen It's a Wonderful Life? How many people have seen It's a Wonderful Life? Yeah, if you haven't seen that, you ought to watch it. It's a black and white movie, and it's a little slow and all that, but the fact of the matter is it's a great flick. As a community banker, you know, it makes me cry every year I watch it, and I had the kids watching, like, why are you watching this? By the end, they're crying next to me. It's great. But the fact of the matter is that's what it's about. That's exactly what happens, okay, that they have a run on the bank, and he says, you got to trust me. I'm going to stick with you. You got to stick with me. This is how this works. And he was able to mitigate that reputation risk right around the Christmas time when it mattered most, you know. So, okay, so now I'm going to take you down a little road here with some ethical behavior that happened in the financial industry about, you know, actually it's been about 14 years ago, 15 years ago. And we're going to have a little fun here. So play along. I'm going to do some of my impressions, and they're not so good, but hopefully you guys will like them. So, this is about the financial disaster. This is really how it went, and how it got created, and what actually happened with the ethics involved around the mortgage crisis. So at the mortgage brokers, I'm gonna have to read it from the screen here because that's too small. I'm gonna jump down here with you folks. Gee, I'd like to buy a house, but I haven't saved any money for a down payment, and I don't think I can afford the monthly payments. Can you help me? Well, sure. Since the value of our house will always go up, we don't need down payments anymore. And we can give you a really, really low interest rate for a few years. We'll raise it later, okay? Sure, no problem. There's one more thing. My employer is a real blank and might not verify my employment. Would that be a problem? Oh, no, we can get you a special liar's loan, and you can verify your own employment and income. You guys are awesome. You're really willing to work with guys like me. Well, we don't actually lend you the money, but a bank will do that. So we don't really care if you repay the loan or not. Well, we still get our commission. Wow, let's get started. A few weeks later at the bank, boy, I'd better get rid of these crappy mortgage loans. They're stinking up my office. Thankfully, the real smart guys in New York will buy them and perform their financial magic. I'll call them right away. So let's see what the smart guys are doing. Phew! We better get rid of these crappy mortgages before they start attracting flies. But who would buy this crap, boss? I've got it. First, we'll create a new security and use these crappy mortgages as collateral. We'll call it a CDO or maybe a CMO. We can sell that CDO to investors and promise to pay them back as the mortgages are paid off. But it's crap, isn't it? I don't get it. Sure, individually, these are pretty crappy loans, but we pull them all together, and only some of them will go bad, certainly not all of them. And since housing prices always go up, we really have little to worry about. I still don't get it. The new CDO will work like this. It'll be made up of 3 pieces or tranches, and we will call them the good, the not so good, and the ugly. If some of the mortgages fail, as surely some might, we'll promise to pay the investors holding the good tranche first. We'll pay the not so good investors second, and the ugly investors last. I'm starting to get it, and because the good investors have the least risk, we'll pay them a lower interest rate than the other guys, right? The not so good will get a better interest rate, and the ugly guys, they'll get a nice fat interest rate. Exactly. But wait, it gets better. We'll buy bond insurance for the good piece, and if we do that, the rating agencies will give it a really good rating in the AAA to A range. They will likely give the not so good piece a triple B to B, and it's still pretty good. We won't even bother asking them to rate the ugly piece. So you have managed to create a AAA and triple B security out of a pile of stinky, risky mortgage loans. Boss, you're a genius. Yes, I know. Okay. Now, who are we going to sell these 3 pieces to? Like who? Well, the jerks at the SEC won't let us sell this stuff to widows and orphans, so let's just sell it to our sophisticated institutional clients. Like who? Like insurance companies, banks, small towns in Norway, school boards in Kansas, to anyone who's looking for a high-quality, safe investment. But surely nobody would buy the ugly piece, would they? Well, of course not. Nobody is that stupid. We'll keep that piece and pay ourselves a handsome interest rate. this is all great, but since we are only using the smelly mortgages as collateral and an entirely new security, we haven't really gotten rid of them. Don't we have to show them on our balance sheet? No, of course not. Those guys who write the accounting rules allow us to set up a shell company in the Cayman Islands to take the ownership of the mortgages. The crap goes on their balance sheet, not ours. The fancy name for it is a special purpose vehicle, or SPV. That's great. But why would they let us do that? Aren't we just moving our own crap around? Sure, but we have convinced them that it is vitally important to the health of the U.S. financial system that investors not know about these complex transactions and what is behind them. So let's drop in on the accountants, see what they're doing. Sir, as an investor and a concerned citizen, I demand that you force our financial institutions to show greater transparency and openness in their financial reporting. Yeah, right. Get lost. Gee, we never saw it coming. Are you kidding me? Back in Norwegian Village Pension Fund, hey man, what the heck is up? We're not receiving our monthly payments. Yeah, I meant to call you, but it's been really crazy around here. It seems that the liars that took out the mortgages backing our CDO aren't able to pay them off. Wait a minute. We bought the AAA good piece of the CDO, you know, the safe one. We're supposed to be getting paid first. Well, unfortunately, the loans were quite a bit crappier than we originally thought, and there is little cash flow coming in. Frankly, I assure you, we're as disappointed as you are. But you told me that the housing prices would always go up and that your borrowers could always refinance their mortgages. Yeah, that was a bad assumption on our part. Sorry. Bad assumption, my frigid Norwegian behind. What about the AAA rating from the agencies? Yeah, we messed that up too. But this security was insured. What about the insurers? Are you kidding? There's no way they'd have enough money to set aside to cover this. Well, that's just great. What am I supposed to tell my villagers? Tell them you messed up. All right, that's the end. So, needless to say, you know, who would say that they didn't see it coming? I mean, I had my neighbors refinancing their mortgages like 3 times in 2 years. And you know, what'd they do with that money? They didn't put in a savings account. They didn't send their kid to college. They bought flat screen TVs. They put on an addition. They redid their kitchen. They did all kinds of different things, right? So just to show you what happens in the financial world when things go awry, these guys actually created security instruments that didn't exist, and then it was never questioned. In the housing market, there's a whole debate on whether that, you know, where that actually came about, right? Mandate from Congress that everyone has the right to own a house. That's false. Everyone has the right to earn their ability to pay for a house. That's the truth that's come out of all that. So now to the subject matter here of the lecture. There's a lot of different things that you can be told, a lot of different vernacular we could get into, a lot of different concepts. But the Better Business Bureau's uncommon sense are really divided into 4 different buckets. So principle and genuine, these are traits of leaders, okay? So traits of individuals. Principle and genuine, they value others, they seek results, and they display growth. It's that simple. So we're going to cover those just real briefly. So principle and genuine, they seek wisdom. High character people seek something greater than intelligence or knowledge. They seek wisdom. They have trustworthiness. High character people are true to their beliefs. They have integrity. So they do what they say they're going to do. They have honesty. So they speak of truth and justice. Those things are very, very important. I once had just an example of this. I had a family member, and they'll remain nameless, but that person lost a whole bunch of credibility in our family over time because they simply didn't ever do what they said they were going to do. You guys ever have that before? You have a family member who says, hey, dinner's at 6, and they show up at like 7, or they don't show up at all, or whatever. You know, that's what we're talking about here. Just the basics of doing what you say you're going to do. Or if you're not going to make it, you make a phone call, right? and you say, hey, something happened. You don't lie. Hey, something happened. I've got a change in plans. Can we do this, right? But people that have issues in this particular principle and genuine, they don't see it as an issue. They're kind of on their time. They're more introverted and focused on themselves versus focused on the people around them and how they weigh in society. Okay? So think about that. You know, I'm hoping this is self-reflective for you as we go along. They value others. So they have respect from everyone. You know, there's nothing worse than, I belong to a country club and I get to play golf and all that. And we have people that are working at the country club. And they get treated this unbelievably poor by some of the members. I mean, they just abuse them. And it's because they're the member and this person's the servant or something. I don't know what they're thinking. But you've probably seen that in a restaurant, right? Somebody gets the order wrong, or this is hot or cold, and they immediately just want to start hammering on the help. You know, it's probably not that person's fault. Wait staff work hard for their money. You know, they live off tips. And so how you respect someone that you don't know is the true issue of your character. Compassion for others. High character people extend unenumerated kindness to others, just in their daily lives. You're not looking to get credit, it's just how you do it. Forgiveness. They're easily willing to forgive. Unity, learning and mentoring, serving leadership. So the high character leaders put their success of others and the group ahead of themselves. You know, there's a book that just came out, I forget who wrote it, called Leaders Eat Last. You know, that kind of concept where, you are putting everyone in front of you. That merciless leadership is an excellent quality. And honoring authority. So high character people respect boundaries for behavior. So there's a certain time where we could get that comic strip that we just did and really get raunchy in the Phi-Psi house, couldn't we? We could probably do that. But this is probably not the time or place for that. So you got to pick your battles, pick your right venue, okay? If you have high character ethics, you wouldn't do that. They seek results. So you're looking for improvement, right? So justice is very, very important. Courage, accountability, stewardship, seeking counsel, and striving for excellence. These aren't high bars. Again, these are things that you could do in your daily lives. And finally, you display growth. So you have maturation and transformation. You got to remember, today, this High Street graduate's here talking to you about character ethics. That's growth. Simple as that. I was always a good guy, don't get me wrong. I always was standing up for what was right and what was true, but I wasn't always focused on growing myself in that regard. I had entrepreneurship and working 18 hours a day makes you into an honest individual. There's just not enough time to get into trouble. And then you find out what that commodity is, though. So do you think all these things build value? Do you know the concept that I'm talking about? So, in today's world, is this our reality? When we look at it, today's world, do these qualities, are they in our world today? How many people think they're in our world today? Raise them high. Raise them high. Okay. How many people think they're not really in our world anymore? Well, that's good. That's good that nobody thinks that, because they are. But, you got to find out, you got to know where they're at. You have to seek truth through logical sources and sources that are truthful and giving you feedback and giving you what's happening out there. There's a lot of stuff going on, right? So we've got the fake news, What's out there? Now, I'm not picking a side of the aisle. I'm just saying that everything you read in a newspaper, is that fact? No, it's not. Where you go to seek truth matters. A lot of people do it through their faith. I do it through my surroundings. So who I'm associating with. That matters. They rub off on you. You are supported in how you want to act. It all matters. Little white lies are out there every day. We see it all the time with our friends, our colleagues, that kind of thing. You got to call people out on that. Hey, that's probably not the right thing to do. And that's socially acceptable. Okay? So I think there's not enough of that in our society today. There's law and order and, and then everything else. And morality is there with law and order. People that want to live by the collective rules that we've all decided as a society we're going to have. So what can you do to establish a higher standard? I think we want to go ahead and hand out our handouts at this point. So I have these concepts for you on a color copy here. We're going to pass them out to everybody, okay? And we're not going to go over them. I went through them already, but I wanted you to take them with you today. And this is what I'll charge you with. You know, review these things. Put it someplace where you see it every day, okay? I'm certain some of you may do a devotional. You may have something that you do every day. You might get up and, you know, get ready in front of the mirror or something. Put it where you can see it every day and say, am I living up to these qualities? You know, which one of these qualities do I like about my friends? You might want to have a group discussion with your friends. Hey, does this happen? You know, does it matter? How do you feel about these things? You may have some people that you see, I know you've seen them, where you see a friend, a colleague, a family member that's kind of fallen off the wagon, right? They're observing unethical behavior. That's important that you take them aside and say, hey, you know, I kind of see you're doing this. I care about you. Is there a way that we can maybe talk about this? Okay? So, again, it's a daily and a lifetime ritual to be ethical. And it starts from the beginning of when you were born and how you were raised. But every day, how you act matters. You know, now our young people have a digital footprint, right? Everybody familiar with the digital footprint? So most folks that are in college right now, you have a digital footprint goes back to when you were 6 or 7, maybe, right? When did you guys get your first phone? Students, when did you get your first phone? 6, 10? When? 6th grade, okay, so that would be what? You were 11? 11, 12, okay? So you have already created a digital footprint for yourself. Everything that you do there, every picture at the bar or whatever, you're creating this, you're already on the world already knows who you are. You've got 6, 7 years of record out there, okay? So that all matters. So just remember that. When you're out there living your life, having a good time, watch your digital footprint. We just saw that it's not private, right? So we watched Mark Zuckerberg get grilled for 2 whole days, you know, on Capitol Hill. Believe me, if anybody wants your information that's out there, watch what's on your digital footprint and take pride in what your digital footprint has to say. Your employer's going to look at it. I guarantee you. So is your wife and your in-laws. So, but why? Why does, again, all of this matter? Why does it matter? What's the big payday here? Right? Why? What's the incentive for me to do it? Just to be a good guy? Does being a good guy pay? Be a good guy pay? Yeah, it pays pretty well. So these are the building blocks. The byproducts of having good character ethics. One of the most important ones, you might get into heaven if you're a good guy or a gal. You know? Of course, everybody is saved. I understand. That's a kind of a pun. It's the right thing to do. It aids in your personal brand, increases your marketability, establishes value, and over time reaps huge rewards. Just unparalleled rewards. Much of what surrounds us today is in direct conflict with what we've talked about here in the practices of ethical behavior and character ethics. It's just in direct conflict. You won't hear about it. You might see the last snippet after the sports on the 11 o'clock news might be something good that happened in society today, right? It's out there. You just have to find it. A lot of times, you don't have to find it. You can create it. You can be the difference maker. We all have the ability to make a difference. So that's why it's so much more important now than ever before to observe these character ethics. It's kind of in the minority, wouldn't you think? So if something's in the minority, that means it's scarce. What does its price do? It goes up. It becomes more valuable. It's basically supply and demand in this day and age. Simple supply and demand. You know, if you're in the business world today and you can answer a phone call on the same day, you have a 95% chance of getting the business because other people will not. If you tell the truth and you stick with someone through thick and thin, it's statistically proven that they will pay up to 25% more for your product or service because they like you and trust you. That, my friends, is how you leverage ethics. Okay? It's a great byproduct of doing what you should be doing anyway. So character ethics exists if you are brave enough to observe them. Good leaders don't care what the pack is doing. Ethical leaders don't follow everyone else just because everyone else is doing it. You've heard all that. I'm not going to harp on it. But true leadership is identifying these and doing the right thing, even when it's just a shade. When it's just a shade, oh, nobody will ever know. Well, he always knows, and you always know. You've got your own built-in barometer. We were talking about that at dinner, and it's right here. You know when you do things that are unethical. You feel it in your belly. The noise goes off in your head. You know it. Listen to it. Follow it. Make it a passion. So, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Well, this is a great verse, right? You know, Rush used it in a really cool song. 2112 Overture. I don't know if you got, I'm a percussionist, so I always dig that kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is this passage here is kind of misunderstood a little bit. So let me just jump into it a little bit briefly. The meek, you know, are misdefined really. So people think the meek are weak, lowly people, you know, folks that are very, you know, well, that's not the definition of meek. The definition of meek are people that seize the day. People that take advantage of the things that they have, understand that they are in control, understand that they can help control others and influence others to do the right things. That's the kind of meek that the Lord was talking about in the Bible. And I fully believe that they will inherit the earth. So with that, I want to thank you all for being here. Thanks for listening to me. Hopefully this was enlightening for you and a little bit entertaining. You know, I've built my whole career on character ethics. I have. And I can't think of any other way that I would rather spend it doing the right thing. It's been tough. It's a hard road. But you know what? I know now, though, I can go virtually anywhere, talk to people that have known me and know what kind of person I am, and I immediately have built that trust for them. And that helps me do what I'm doing as a community banker. So I have customers that come in today that are not even customers. And they say, I know I can trust you. Can I come talk to you? I'm not one of your customers. You know, and sure, I'll sit down and talk with them. It drives Tracy crazy because I usually jack up my schedule and I'm late and all kinds of things. But I want to make time for those people, okay? So remember, you hold all the keys. It's a choice you make every day. Take our sheet. Let's put it someplace where we can look at it and reflect and see how we're going to be living those principles, okay? And talk about it amongst yourselves and with your peers, your family, your pastor, your colleagues, because it's in style. And it's the best way to leverage your education here that you've had at Ohio Wesleyan. Thank you very much. Now, I'd entertain any questions if anybody has any questions. Okay, great. I'm going to jump down here and be with the people because I'm not really good about being on the stage.
Hi, my name is Anthony. Thank you very much for speaking to us today. So you said earlier, I just want to rewind a little bit, that you constantly emphasize that your biggest risk in banking is your reputation, right? So like around 2008, you know, think back 10 years from now, like I think faith in like our banking systems was kind of low, you know? So yeah, kind of. So over the past 10 years, there's been added regulation. I mean, Dodd-Frank, et cetera. You know, things have been, you know, ramped up a bit for the banks, and now we're starting to divest from that. I know the executive office is starting to talk about like repealing parts of Dodd-Frank and repealing some of the regulations. So I'm curious to know, what are you doing as a community banker in order to continue to instill trust with your clients and like internally and externally, I guess?
Great question. That's a great question. You know, it's very timely, too. I've just spent the last 6 days in Washington, D.C., and I go every year, and I'm there telling the community bank story. The issue in the financial sector is that we have one regulatory system for a dual banking system. That's the issue. Now, we've got to remember, 85% of the market share is controlled by 30 banks. There's 5,600 banks in the United States. 5,600 banks, okay? The top 30 control 85% of the market share. Pretty serious, right? So what we did back in that time, first off, is we tried to tell, at Heartland, we tried to tell everybody this was going to happen. All the community banks were in Congress, in the halls of Congress, saying we're going to have this giant recession because these guys are jamming people into mortgages that they can't pay back. And you guys are backing them up at the federal government because they're putting them into Fannie and Freddie, which are government-sponsored entities. Okay? So we were trying to tell them. So what we did is all we could do is batten down the hatches. We didn't grow our institution. We became what realtors would call uncompetitive because we weren't willing to do what the big banks were doing or the mortgage brokers were doing. We weren't willing to do it. And so what we did is we horned in, we reserved capital, we started to become extremely efficient, and we waited for the train to come. That's what we did. And internally, we had a battle inside the bank as well. You alluded to that. How did you deal with your people? I had people that were paid to originate mortgages, and when I wouldn't do what the other guy was doing, they left. I had a mortgage company that made the bank $250,000 a year. So a little bank, that's a big deal. That's like a month and a half worth of income, right? With a former bank director here, and he understands that. So that was like a month and a half worth of income. That's a needle mover. They were jamming all these people into these mortgages. We found out about it, and they were driving, the guys were driving Lamborghinis and making all kinds of money. So we came in and said, look, we're not doing this anymore. We fired the management, and we told the remaining 30 employees that they were going to report to the bank management. The next day, 29 employees quit, and they went across the street, and they kept jamming people into mortgages. Okay, so that's another thing that we did. We kept talking and reinforcing in our ranks that this was wrong, and that just hang on, the train's coming, it's going to pay off for us, and that's what happened. So when we went to cash in the beginning of 2007, and then I think we bought back into the market in October of 2009 at about 6,400. You do the math. Yeah, that's a pretty good choice. So we did really well. We also were the only lender that had any money to lend because our balance sheet wasn't in trouble. So all the people that the big green bank, well, I won't name any names, the big banks were kicking to the curb. All the big banks were kicking people to the curb because they were trying to save their institution. They needed their capital back. We were talking with Liz. Where's Liz? The entrepreneur Liz here at dinner about cram downs. They were taking the technical defaults, anything they could do to get their capital back. Well, those people needed a bank. Hey, we'll take you. We're Heartland. We'll take you. We were able to also recapitalize our businesses that got in trouble, because almost all of them had big issues. The other thing we were able to do through that, building trust, continue ramping up. We doubled our marketing budget in 2012 because we were already around rounding first base and heading to second, and everybody else is still in the dugout trying to figure out the capital and dealing with the regulations. And so that's why we're $1 billion today. It's a great story. I want to say that we were super smart in doing it. We were just trying to do the right thing. I don't think there's anything smart about it at all. As far as the financial regulatory system, Senate Bill 2155 passed the Senate. Did you know that the Senate can pass bills? It's like the third one they've passed in the 115th Congress. It's a big deal. Hey, they know where the yay button is. Well, anyway, that particular bill has 17 Democratic co-sponsors, 67 out of 100 votes. Actually, out of 99 because McCain's not voting anymore. Okay, so that's pretty good support. And what that has, it's not unwinding Dodd-Frank. That's a myth. Okay, Dodd-Frank has still about 160 provisions that haven't even been enacted. It was a giant piece of legislation. So what they're doing is little things like this, like they're taking little banks like Heartland Bank and exempting us from the Volcker rule. So the Volcker rule is based around giant banks that create these mortgage securities, the CMOs or the CDOs, and they don't have any skin in the game, and they're sending them to a GSE, right? So they got to keep 7% of those mortgages. Well, we get exempted from that. We're not even in that space, right? I mean, some of these securities are bigger than some community banks entirely. Stuff like that. The HMDA requirements, that's a big thing that the left is all about. Oh, they're going to do away with HMDA. They're not doing away with HMDA. They're just taking the additional 25 fields. We already have like 38 fields that we collect of data. HMDA is the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. Banking is all about acronyms, just if you didn't figure that out. So what that does is that has a that's allowing us to not have further reporting only if you originate 500 or fewer mortgages in a whole year. In a whole year. So it's just, there's a whole bunch of stuff just for the small community banks that are getting over-regulated. We're starting to create a tiered regulatory system. There's 2 or 3 things that came good out of Dodd-Frank. It's the very first time ever that the word community bank was listed on the Federal Register. Very first time. They acknowledge that we exist. We're getting there. Second thing they did, they modernized the FDIC insurance. So the FDIC insurance, since it was created, has been $100,000. So they more than doubled it, so now it's $250,000. So the Senate Bill 2155, if you give me your card, I can send you a whole rundown on that. It's not overhauling Dodd-Frank. Speaker Ryan misspoke. I don't know if you probably saw the headline. You know, as he's walking out the door, he said, yeah, we're going to repeal Dodd-Frank. Yeah, they're never going to repeal Dodd-Frank. They just don't have the votes. Yeah, I don't think it'd be a good idea anyway. I was for Dodd-Frank, frankly, because if you take the world to the brink of financial disaster, do you think you need a new law? Yeah, pretty common sense. Does it have to be the same for everybody? No. You know, it should be tiered.
It also gave a lot of institutions business to do, I think, because there was a lot more paperwork.
Oh, there's a whole other industry created out of that. Yeah, there's companies now that do vendor management. They monitor your contracts. You have a whole risk framework now. You guys probably study risk in your classes, right? And how you can be a risk manager. So now there's a whole position in banks for just risk.
Yeah, I mean, ADP and Paychex kind of blew up after Dodd-Frank because of the PPA restatements and a lot of other billable services, I suppose. But yeah, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I'd be interested in talking to you about the legislature.
Yeah, would love to tell you about it. It's good stuff. And it's going to get passed too, so I just tell you that right now. Anybody want to bet? No. It's going to be closer to the Memorial Day, but it'll pass. It'll pass the House, and if I'm lucky, I might be able to see the President sign it in person. That'd be great. Yes, sir.
For the benefit of a lot of the students here, what you've talked about in some ways is institutional ethics, but you've grounded an individual. In the situation of the Wells Fargo Bank, you basically had an institutional lack of ethics that enforced behavior on individuals that was unethical. What kind of advice and guidance would you give to students who are going to be starting at the bottom of the totem pole of what their options are and their choices are if they're going to be ethical in an institution that's making decisions that, whether they realize it or not, are not ethical?
Yeah, great question. You know, we were talking a little bit about that at dinner too. Any publicly traded company is required to have a confidential whistleblower program, period. Most institutions now with this whole Me Too effort, you know, for sexual harassment and for all these things that should not be happening in the workplace, for discrimination against women. All these things are horrible. They happen. They do happen, and they're pretty prevalent. They need to be coming to an end. So what you're going to find is the whistleblower framework is now seeping its way down into smaller institutions and smaller companies. So there's numerous ways that you can stand up for what's right and report it. Okay, and you can do it anonymously, and you're protected at that point. So if you do something, you cannot be fired for retribution if you raised your hand and said something was unethical. That's against the law. The Department of Labor will be right next to you, and if it fits their agenda, so will the AFL-CIO and a couple other people. Okay, so the fact of the matter is that's the mechanism that they would use, is going through the whistleblower piece. If you work for a large institution, especially if they're public traded, they're required to have that. It's in your personnel manual. They should go over that on an annual basis with their sensitivity training and sexual harassment training and things of that nature. Yep. And don't be afraid to do it either, because guess what? You're the hero. That stuff happens in big companies, and the people up top, do you think Wells Fargo board wanted them to fraudulently create millions of checking accounts? No, they didn't want that, you know, but they didn't know about it because no one would report it. You know, they were getting paid to do certain things, right? So they're, you know, if everybody's in on it, is it unethical? Yes, it's still unethical. Great question. Thank you for asking.
Hi, and that was a good example of having courage to speak up, right? So as a business leader and employer and people manager, how do you empower, encourage, and maybe reward your employees to demonstrate these values that you have talked about, like speaking up and having the courage to do so?
Yeah, great question. Excellent question. You know, not enough companies do this, and if you observe it, and maybe you can go to your place of employment and suggest it, you know, everyone has to have a voice. So we started we've always done that, but we actually put it on steroids about, it's probably been, I want to say, what is this, 18? Jeez, it's late at night and I've been on the road like 7 years ago. The Better Business Bureau has a character ethics survey, okay? And actually it's a, what do they call it? The trust survey. And so we started putting a trust survey out to our people. Now we do 2 surveys a year. And it's basically not completely anonymous, and they get to tell us how leadership is listening to them, and if they have trust in leadership, if there's an issue, are we doing enough? Are we listening to their ideas? Are we treating them fairly? I tell you what, the first time we took that test, it was brutal, because we hadn't been asking. Therefore, we couldn't react. You know, so if you don't ask, you don't get the data, you can't react. So the first time we did it, and the first time I read it, I was super angry. I'm like, well, we do this, and we do that, and we do this. I can't believe they're grading us like this, and such and so forth. Well, then I stopped, you know. I took the night off and slept. I got up the next morning, and I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, obviously, if they think that, we're not doing it. You know, or we're not at least talking about it more enough. You know, we're not showing them. So what we did is we did that survey, and then we show them the raw data. And then we have them meet in groups by department. And then we have them send us back reaction to that. Okay, so that's what we've done in our organization. We also create opportunities for people to become leaders and to and express their opinions, but also be difference makers inside the company. So we have an all-employee meeting. We used to have them 4 times a year. Now we have them 2 times a year. Bring everybody in. We have a nice meal. We pray. And then we talk about our business goals and where we're at to budget. And then we showcase our people that had great ideas, that help bring up process improvement initiatives, that have recruited other people to join the squad, and have gone above and beyond the call of duty. And we pat them on the back and make it public. So recognition is super important for people for doing the right thing. You know, it's not all about pay. Happiness matters. You're going to figure that out real quick when you get out in the real world. Happiness is not overrated. You know, and having that freedom and working for an ethical enterprise is mammoth. It's just, it really matters. I was just in a thing today that talked about what millennials think. And of course, everybody thinks they know how millennials think. It's the hottest topic, right, to figure out millennials. And frankly, I think millennials get thrown under the bus, you know, by a lot of folks. Some of the most brightest people we have are millennials in the bank. I've got a gentleman that runs my entire technology. He's going to be senior vice president. I already told him he hasn't been promoted yet, but he's one of your alumni. He's an entrepreneur, came to work for us. His name's Tawny Tasnium. Came to work here, or not here. He came to work at Heartland right after college. He worked under me in the internet banking department. Quickly became entrepreneurial inside of the organization. So don't think you can not be an entrepreneur. You know, you have to have your own company to be an entrepreneur. That's false. You can be an entrepreneur every day. And I encourage you to do it inside of the bubble you're in. Okay? But what we try to do is promote folks from within and really help leverage their well-being, you know, inside the organization. And then we celebrate. Thank you for asking that question. Other questions? Yeah. Ladies first.
So in your career, what is your greatest ethical dilemma that you had where you couldn't see what the right answer was right away?
That's a good question. You know, I really don't struggle, I guess, finding the right answer. There was a time where we had made an error at the bank, and it was about a $130,000 error. And it had gone on for this family for about 8 years. And it was really just a technical error. Somebody fat-fingered an interest rate, and they'd been paying the wrong interest rate. $130,000. And it was going to bust our quarter. And they were like, and the customer themselves didn't. This was earlier on in my banking career. And the customer wasn't asking for any of the money back. They said, oh, we understand it's a mistake and everything else. And that might have been it. But I really don't. I've always been brought up, if you didn't do the right thing, that there would be bigger consequences that no one on earth was going to have any part in. It was going to be, the Almighty's going to come crashing down on you. So, or my father, one or the other. And so I just never have really struggled. I've never really struggled with that. I know that's a cop-out, I think, but I just can't put my finger on one. Because I was always the one that was spoiling the party. I was, oh, come on, everybody's doing it or whatever, and I was not like that. So.
Did you give him the $130,000 back?
I did.
All in one lump sum?
And interest. Yeah, it was the right thing to do. Hey, if I come up with another one here, I'll let you know. But I honestly, I can't really think of where I had to decide whether it was ethical or not. Now, there has been some instances where someone may think they're wronged. Like I had a lady the other day, this is just a couple weeks ago, non-customer comes in and sends me this letter and says, your loan department was slow and blah, 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 therefore we lost all this money and everything else waiting on you to close a real estate transaction. And so she wanted 16% interest on, how much was it, like $700,000 for 28 days. Yeah, it came up to like, $4,000 or something, and time, trouble, all this other stuff, and that was her demand. And so she calls up, makes an appointment. Tracy's like, should I let this person in? I'm like, well, yeah, I'd let them in. I mean, as long as they're not going to kill me or something, let's talk, So we sat down with her, and she was just demanding all this stuff. And I'm like, well, you're not even my customer. Your contract on your property, we met, the loan closed within the period of the contract. Nowhere were we wrong here. Yeah, but you guys did this, and you didn't communicate with me. We weren't required to communicate with her, but we, didn't communicate with me. You didn't do this, you didn't do that. And she was very upset about it, and had to bring in her sisters from Minnesota, and it was just she was just in a bit of a consternation. So I thought about it, and of course everybody at the bank's like, well, she's not even our customer. What are you going to do? Well, she came and gave me feedback, right? So she came in, not super threatening. I've been threatened way worse. And I thought, man, so what I did is I wrote her a check for $250 for her time, and sent her a nice letter, and she wanted a formal apology. And I said, well, I'm sorry. I don't think we did, anything wrong. We were working, there was other things that I can't really disclose that our customer had made some choices that slowed down the process. But it meant a lot to me that she would at least come to the office and tell me how she felt. Because, we spend a lot of money trying to reach people, right? Marketing and getting the phone to ring and all that kind of stuff. That's all real dollars. And if you can make an impact of one person, and they're going to take the time out of their day. She drove, 2 counties over to come see me. So she's invested in it. She got like a 5-page letter, and I'm sure she rehearsed and all of that. But the fact of the matter is, it meant a lot to me that she'd even come and do that. And so I said, I'll pay you $250 for your time. Thank you. That's where we're at. And actually, it wasn't even $250. We gave her the money market rate for a year on that money, which is like less than 1%. But then we just bumped it up to $250 for her time. So that was a tough decision because I didn't want to give her anything because I knew I wasn't wrong. But then I thought, well, the right thing to do would be to thank her for her time and giving me feedback on what her perception was of our performance as a financial institution. So. Okay, one more. Yep.
My question's not nearly as deep. I was just curious, the definition.
I'll try to be brief.
Oh, community bank, and is it based on the charter, the assets, the number of branches? What defines a community bank?
That's a great question. You know, we have, Wells Fargo actually was claiming that they were a community bank. We're your community bank. So, I mean, there is no formal definition of a community bank. Like I said, it was codified in the code based on Senator Durbin. So everybody knows about the Durbin Amendment, right? Dick Durbin from Illinois, the senator from Illinois. Yeah, so he codified really a community bank because he said that community banks can make twice as much interchange on their credit card portfolio and their debit card portfolio as large banks, and that number is 10 billion. So it was 5 billion, and they crossed it out in pencil and wrote 10 billion, and then they passed that bill in the middle of the night. That's how that got to 10 billion. But some would say it's that. I'll be honest with you, I think it's the way that you do business, the way that you can have decision makers on the ground talking to folks and giving them your expertise. Banking's not about a yes or no. Hey, do I qualify for this loan? You might not even have the right vehicle. So you need to sit down with a banker that understands what you're trying to do, give them a chance to talk you out of it if it's a bad idea, and instead of just saying yes or no, and then picking the right vehicle for whatever the need is. And that's the art of banking. And that's why we go into a small town or whatever, you look around, and some of the smartest people and biggest community servants are the community banker in town, And so people know, hey, I can go ask him, and he's going to tell me the truth. He's going to take time to see me, and I get the benefit of all his experience and knowledge, or his or her. So, okay. It's been a pleasure to be here with you this evening. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Thank you.